The cool night air wrapped around us as we trudged through the dense forest, our flashlights cutting through the darkness like fragile beacons of hope. Jake and I had always been adventurous, but this hike was different. We had decided to take on a trail that was notorious for its eerie legends, a place that locals whispered about around campfires with nervous glances and hushed voices. The path was illuminated only by the weak beams of our flashlights. Tall, gnarled trees loomed above, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, as if they were trying to snatch us away. The forest was silent, save for the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves. A heavy sense of foreboding hung in the air, but we pushed forward, determined to confront our fears. "So, remind me why we're doing this again?" Jake asked, his voice quivering just a bit. I chuckled nervously. "Because we're not kids anymore, Jake. We need to prove to ourselves that we can handle a little spooky story." We both knew the real reason we were here, to see if the legends were true. The stories of ghostly apparitions, mysterious disappearances, and strange lights that had haunted these woods for generations. We had heard it all and couldn't resist the temptation to investigate. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the path became increasingly overgrown, and our flashlights struggled to pierce the thick curtain of darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent our hearts racing, but we laughed it off, dismissing our unease as nothing more than jitters. Then we heard it, an eerie, otherworldly whisper. It was a voice, faint and distant, like a mournful wail carried by the wind. Jake and I exchanged nervous glances, our flashlights trembling in our hands. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's probably just the wind, right?" We tried to convince ourselves that it was just the wind, but deep down we knew it was something more. Ignoring the unsettling sound, we pressed on, our steps quickening. The path eventually led us to a small clearing in the woods, where an old, dilapidated cabin stood. It was a decrepit structure, its wooden walls weathered and gray, with broken windows that stared like empty eye sockets. We cautiously approached it, our curiosity overpowering our fear. The cabin's door creaked open with a haunting groan, revealing a pitch-black interior. We hesitated for a moment, then entered, our flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. Inside, the air was damp and musty, and the floorboards creaked beneath our weight. As we explored the cabin, we discovered old photographs and tattered journals scattered on the floor. They told a story of a family that had once lived here, but had mysteriously vanished without a trace. The entries in the journals spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, sightings of shadowy figures, and a growing sense of dread that had consumed them. As we read the final entry, a chilling gust of wind blew through the cabin, extinguishing our flashlights. Darkness engulfed us, and an overwhelming feeling of dread washed over us. Panic set in, and we fumbled to relight our flashlights, our trembling hands struggling to find the switches. Once our flashlights flickered back to life, we were no longer alone in the cabin. Standing in the doorway was a pale figure, its eyes vacant and hollow, its form flickering like a dying candle. It was the ghostly apparition we had heard about, the spirit of the long-lost family that had once called this place home. We froze in terror as the ghostly figure slowly advanced toward us, its mournful whisper filling the air. It spoke of tragedy, of a curse that had befallen the family, and of the darkness that now dwelled within these woods. We could feel the weight of its sorrow and anger, and it sent shivers down our spines. With trembling hands, we stumbled out of the cabin and into the night, our hearts pounding. The forest had transformed, the trees now twisted and contorted, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The once faint whisper had grown into a chorus of mournful voices, echoing through the woods. We ran blindly through the dark, desperate to escape the haunting presence that pursued us. Our flashlights flickered and died, leaving us in total darkness. We could feel the cold, clammy touch of ghostly hands brushing against us, and the chilling whispers grew louder, filling our ears with despair. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a small, flickering light in the distance. It was a campfire, and a group of hikers sat around it, oblivious to the horror that surrounded us. We rushed toward them, gasping for breath and begging for help. The hikers listened to our frantic tale, their faces filled with disbelief. But as they looked into our terrified eyes, They must have seen the truth. They shared their campfire with us, offering warmth and safety from the horrors of the forest. As we sat by the fire, we could still hear the distant whispers and mournful cries of the spirits that haunted the woods. The legends were true, and we had experienced them firsthand. Our hike in the darkness had led us to a place where reality and the supernatural converged, and we had barely escaped with our lives. To this day, Jake and I cannot forget that night, the night we ventured into the heart of darkness and came face to face with the unknown. It was a harrowing experience that changed us forever, a reminder that some mysteries are best left unexplored, and some horrors are all too real.
The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows through the dense forest. My heart raced as I realized I had lost sight of my hiking group. The trees loomed like towering sentinels, their branches clawing at the inky darkness above. Panic welled up inside me as I fumbled for my flashlight, its feeble beam offering little comfort. We had ventured into these woods in search of adventure, but now, alone and disoriented, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I called out to my friends, my voice trembling in the silence, but received no response. Fear gnawed at the edges of my mind as I contemplated the unsettling possibility of being truly alone in this haunting wilderness. I decided to retrace my steps, following the faint impressions left by our hiking boots in the soft earth. The forest seemed to close in around me, and the once familiar path now appeared twisted and unfamiliar. The rustling leaves and hushed whispers of the wind seemed to mock my efforts, carrying with them an uncanny sense of foreboding. The minutes stretched into an eternity as I continued my solitary journey, each step a struggle against the encroaching darkness. My flashlight's battery began to falter, its beam flickering ominously. With each fading light, my anxiety grew, and the shadows seemed to come alive, dancing in sinister mockery. And then I heard it, a haunting, distant melody that sent shivers down my spine. It was a mournful tune, played on an otherworldly instrument. The music seemed to draw me deeper into the woods, its ethereal beauty masking an underlying malevolence. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound, my steps guided by an irresistible compulsion. As I ventured further into the forest, I came upon a clearing bathed in a soft, ghostly light. In its center stood a grotesque, gnarled tree, its twisted limbs resembling skeletal fingers reaching for the heavens. At the base of the tree, an eerie sight greeted me, a circle of glowing mushrooms pulsating with an unnatural radiance. The haunting melody now seemed to emanate from the tree itself, and I watched in horror as a figure materialized from the shadows. It was a being unlike any I had ever seen, a spectral figure draped in tattered robes, its face obscured by shadows. With a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the abyss, the spectral entity spoke, its words a chilling whisper in the night. It told me of the forest's ancient curse, of the lost souls who had wandered into its depths and never returned. It spoke of the mushrooms, their glow luring unsuspecting travelers to their doom, and of the haunting melody that ensnared their souls. As the entity continued its tale, I realized with a sinking feeling that I had become entangled in the web of this malevolent forest. The chilling truth washed over me. The haunting melody, the glowing mushrooms, and the gnarled tree were all part of a sinister trap. Desperation clawed at my heart as I struggled to break free from the entity's hypnotic grip. I summoned every ounce of willpower, tore my gaze away from the spectral figure, and bolted back into the woods. The haunting melody faded into the distance, replaced by the sounds of my frantic footsteps. Hours passed as I navigated the labyrinthine forest, my flashlight now completely extinguished. I was exhausted, disoriented, and terrified, but I refused to give in to the darkness that threatened to consume me. Finally, just as despair was about to overtake me, I stumbled upon a familiar trail marker. Tears of relief welled in my eyes as I followed the path back to civilization, leaving behind the cursed forest and its malevolent enchantments. When I reunited with my hiking group, they were shocked to see the state I was in. They had also become separated and experienced their own horrors in those woods. We shared our harrowing tales, each one more chilling than the last, vowing never to return to that cursed place. To this day, The memories of that night haunt my dreams, a reminder of the supernatural terrors that lurk in the darkest corners of the world. I learned that the forest held secrets far beyond our comprehension, and that some places were best left unexplored, for they concealed horrors that could shatter the very fabric of reality.